There's a squirrel in your yard right now, sitting on top of a small pile of dirt, and in about 4 seconds it's going to dig that exact spot back open, even though it just finished burying something there 30 seconds ago. Welcome to Squirrelology. Today we're going deep into the real reason squirrels bury and rebury food, and it's nothing like what most people assume. Sign 4 is going to explain why some squirrels fake a burial entirely, pretending to hide food they never actually put in the ground. And Sign 7 gets into a kind of memory most people don't know squirrels even have, one that outperforms human memory in a very specific way. Stick with me, because by the end you'll never watch a squirrel dig a hole the same way again. Let's start with the obvious question, the one everyone assumes has an obvious answer. Sign 1 is that burying food was never really about hiding it from you. Most people assume squirrels bury nuts to keep them safe from other squirrels, and that's part of it, but it's not the main event. Dr. Michael Steele at Wilkes University has spent decades studying scatter-hoarding in squirrels, and his research shows the primary threat squirrels are managing isn't other squirrels at all. It's decay, mold, and the simple fact that nuts left exposed lose their nutritional value fast. Burying isn't concealment first, it's preservation first. Soil acts like a natural refrigerator, regulating moisture and temperature in a way that keeps a nut viable for months. Try this yourself. Next time you watch a squirrel bury something, pay attention to where it chooses to dig. It's rarely random. It favors shaded, slightly damp soil over dry, sun-baked patches, which lines up almost exactly with what you'd choose if you were trying to keep food fresh without a fridge. What gets me about this one is how much foresight is baked into an act that looks, on the surface, like pure instinct. That squirrel isn't hiding a nut. It's stocking a pantry it can't see yet for a version of itself that doesn't exist yet either. Sign 2 is the part that surprised researchers as much as it surprises everyone watching for the first time, and it's this: squirrels almost never bury food in the same spot they found it. Steele's work, along with related research on scatter-hoarding species, shows squirrels will carry a nut a meaningful distance from its original source before burying it, sometimes 20 or 30 feet, crossing multiple potential hiding spots along the way without stopping. This isn't laziness working backward, it's strategic spacing. A single cache discovered by a rival costs the squirrel one nut. A cluster of caches discovered in one place costs it dozens. Try this tomorrow. Watch a squirrel collect food from a feeder or a tree and time how long it takes before it actually buries anything. That gap, the carrying distance, is the squirrel actively managing risk in real time, deciding where a rival's nose is least likely to find it. There's something almost unsettling about how deliberate this is, watching an animal the size of a shoe calculating probability without any of the visible signs we associate with thinking. Sign 3 is where things start getting strange, because squirrels don't just bury food, they organize it. Multiple studies on scatter-hoarding rodents, squirrels included, have found evidence of what researchers call chunking, sorting food by type, size, or even nutritional value into different cache clusters rather than burying everything in one undifferentiated pile. A squirrel might bury all its acorns in one general area and all its hickory nuts in another, essentially building separate mental categories for different food types. Try this yourself. If you have both oak and another nut-bearing tree in your yard, watch whether a squirrel treats them as one undivided task or two separate ones, often returning to bury each type in a distinct cluster rather than mixing them as it goes. What this suggests is a level of categorization most people never credit a squirrel with having, an animal quietly running its own inventory system, sorting its pantry the way you might sort a grocery bag by what needs the fridge and what doesn't. Sign 4 is the one that sounds almost like deception, because it is. This is called deceptive caching, and it's exactly what it sounds like: a squirrel digging a hole, going through every physical motion of burying food, patting the dirt down convincingly, and walking away without actually putting anything in the ground. Researchers studying this behavior have documented it specifically in situations where a squirrel senses it's being watched, either by another squirrel or by a potential competitor nearby. The fake burial isn't clumsy or accidental. It's performed with the same care as a real one, precisely because a rival watching from a distance can't tell the difference. Try this tomorrow. If you notice two squirrels in proximity, one digging near a tree while the other watches from a branch, pay attention to whether the digging squirrel actually deposits something or just goes through the motion before walking off in a different direction than where it came from. It's a small moment, but it's genuinely difficult to watch without thinking about what it implies, an animal modifying its own behavior specifically because it understands, on some level, that it's being observed. And that idea, that squirrels are constantly adjusting their behavior based on who might be watching, is exactly what makes sign 6 so unexpected, because it turns out they're not just fooling other squirrels, they're sometimes fooling themselves. Sign 5 is about timing, and it's easy to miss because it happens on a longer scale than most people are watching for. Squirrels don't bury food evenly across the year. They front-load it hard in autumn, when nut availability peaks, then shift almost entirely to retrieval mode as the season turns. What's interesting is how precisely this timing lines up with seasonal changes in the food supply itself, not with temperature or with any single external cue, but with the actual rhythm of when trees are producing. Research on scatter-hoarding species has found that squirrels appear to track this rhythm year over year, adjusting their caching intensity based on how large or small a given autumn's nut crop is. Try this yourself. If you're in an area with productive oak trees, compare how aggressively squirrels cache in a heavy acorn year versus a lighter one. In a big year, you'll see far more caching activity, sometimes described as scatter-hoarding at a much higher rate, almost like the squirrels know a lean year might be coming and are hedging against it. There's something quietly impressive about an animal budgeting for a future it has no way of directly perceiving, working off pattern recognition built from years it can't consciously recall. Sign 6 is the one I mentioned earlier, and it's genuinely one of the strangest findings in this entire area of research. A squirrel doesn't always remember exactly where every single cache is, not with perfect accuracy, but what it does have is an extraordinarily precise memory for the general area, the specific tree, the particular patch of yard, even when the exact few inches get fuzzy over time. This means squirrels sometimes rediscover their own caches almost by accident, digging in the right general zone and using smell as a final confirmation once memory narrows the search down. Dr. Lucia Jacobs at UC Berkeley, whose research focuses on spatial memory in squirrels, has shown that squirrels rely on a genuinely sophisticated internal mapping system, one that uses landmarks, distance, and direction from a home base to organize hundreds of cache locations at once. Try this tomorrow. Watch how a squirrel searches for a cache it clearly remembers existing, but seems uncertain about the exact location of the slight hesitation, the repositioning, the short digs in a tight cluster of spots before finding the right one. That hesitation isn't confusion. It's memory working exactly the way it's supposed to, narrowing a search radius instead of pinpointing an exact coordinate. It's oddly relatable, that particular kind of remembering, knowing you put something somewhere in this general area without being able to picture the precise spot until you're standing right on top of it. Sign 7 takes that memory system even further, because Jacobs's broader body of research suggests squirrels may store literally thousands of cache locations across a single season, and recall a meaningful percentage of them months later. What makes this remarkable isn't just the raw number, it's the method. Squirrels appear to use a mental strategy resembling chunking, similar to how people remember phone numbers in small groups rather than as one long string of digits, organizing caches into clusters tied to specific landmarks rather than memorizing each one as an isolated point. This is spatial memory operating at a level most people never associate with an animal this small, sitting on a fence rail, tail twitching, looking like it isn't thinking about much of anything. Try this yourself. Watch one squirrel over the course of several weeks if you can, and notice how confidently it moves towards certain trees or patches of yard compared to others, almost like it's navigating a map only it can see, which in a very real sense it is. What strikes me most about this sign is how much invisible work is happening underneath something that looks, from a distance, like idle digging in the dirt. Sign 8 is the one I want to slow down for, because underneath all of this science is something a lot quieter and a lot more human than it first appears. Think about what burying and reburying actually requires. trusting a version of yourself in the future to come back, to remember, to need what you're setting aside right now. It's an act built entirely on faith in tomorrow, repeated hundreds of times across a single season, without any guarantee that tomorrow will look anything like today. If you've been through a period of loss or loneliness, or just a stretch of time where the future felt uncertain enough that planning for it seemed almost pointless, there's something quietly steadying about watching an animal do exactly that anyway. Bury something today for a version of itself it can't see yet, trusting that the effort will matter eventually even without proof in the moment. It's not sentimentality to notice that. It's just an honest observation about what this behavior actually requires, a kind of patience and forward faith that doesn't ask to be witnessed or rewarded right away. And here's what the science actually establishes, without romanticizing any of it. Scatter-hoarding, as documented by researchers like Steele and Jacobs, is one of the clearest examples in the animal world of delayed reward behavior. An animal investing real time and real energy into an outcome it won't benefit from for weeks or months, based entirely on pattern, memory, and internal calculation rather than immediate gratification. That's not a metaphor for anything. It's simply what a squirrel's brain is doing every single time it pats dirt back over a nut and walks away. It's planning across a gap of time it cannot see, using nothing but memory and instinct to bridge it. And it works often enough that the behavior has persisted across generations of squirrels doing the exact same thing in the exact same yards, year after year, long before any of us were watching. So here's a real question, not a rhetorical one. Drop in the comments. Have you ever watched a squirrel rebury the same spot 2 or 3 times in a row? And if you have, did it look frantic to you, or did it look deliberate? Because I'd genuinely like to know how differently people are reading the same behavior. And if this changed the way you're going to look at the next squirrel you see digging in your yard, send this to the one person you know who already narrates squirrel behavior out loud like they're doing commentary, because they're going to want this. This has been Squirrelology. Next time you catch a squirrel patting dirt over a hole, give it a second before you walk away. There's more going on underneath that dirt than you think.